I want to call to order this workshop/business meeting of the Council Bluffs Community School District Board of Directors. Mr. Wilson, please call the roll.
Dr. Algress. Mr. Minshaw.
Present.
Mr. McGlade.
Present.
Mr. Kazire.
Present.
Mr. Arthur.
Here.
Ms. Shudak.
Here.
And Mr. LaFurla.
Present. Now, please join me in a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Next, we have approval of our agenda. Is there a motion?
I move approval of our agenda as presented.
A motion, is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. And our agenda has been approved. Now we have approval of the minutes from the work session and workshop business meetings of June 22nd, 2021. Is there a motion?
I can move to approve the minutes from the work session and the workshop business meeting of June 22nd, 2021 as presented.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. And the motion to approve our minutes has been carried. Next, we have public participation. This is an opportunity for members of the public to address the board regarding agenda items or other matters of concern. We did have one person request in advance to address the board. Anna Hunter, are you here? Please come up to the podium and speak into the microphone. And you have 5 minutes.
We need her address too.
Oh, can you
Hi,
please give us your
I'm Anna
address?
Hunter. I live at 303 North 2nd Street, Council Bluffs, Iowa. In May, I came to a school board meeting to implore you to have a plan for the fall that would give all families a choice to responsibly and safely return to the classroom. I suggested classrooms with students whose families are in mutual agreement in good faith that their students would wear masks at the very least until a vaccine was physically available to their children. I had full confidence that our school board, along with many others who had parents requesting a safe choice for their children all across Iowa, would have a plan in place, as we have heard all summer that the Delta and now Lambda variants are increasing at rapid rates. These variants affect children even more so than previously. I realize that our governor has given you undue burdens under the guise of choice, and I do not envy the political, if not moral, quandary you all must be placed into, but that's kind of the job. You were quick to say there was no plan to give parents a mask-wearing classroom choice in May. So tonight I ask you, what is your plan? All of our best experts on the subject, doctors around the country, those touched by COVID, all say mask wearing in the class is a must to educate our students in person this fall. So how do we do this when our governor has failed our kids? I know it's a hard ask, but like I tell my kids, we can do hard things. For our family, that looks like me closing my business of 5 years. That provides a vital service to our community so that I can homeschool until there is a safe choice for my kids. That means my family will spend less money in the community, and we will be forced to do, that means my family will spend less money in the community. Other families will find it much harder to find care for their kids, and more moms will leave the workforce. These are the hard things Iowans will be forced to do without mask-wearing classrooms. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Hunter. Next, we have the superintendent's report. Dr. Murillo.
Thank you, Mr. LaFurla. At this time, this evening, we're going to have two informational presentations. The first one will be about, will be our 2021-2024 strategic goals. This evening, Dr. Vorthman, Mr. Wilson, and Mr. Hamilton will be presenting on the new strategic goals that we will be rolling out for this school year. I'm pretty excited about the strategic goals. I think we have refined the goals that we had that ended in 2021. Dr. Vorthman is going to discuss with you our academic side of the house. So Dr. Vorthman, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Murillo. Good evening, Board. It's my pleasure tonight to start off the presentation to provide you an update with the 2021-2024 district strategic goals. As you recall, we set an initial set of goals in 2019 to help guide us through to 2021. Those goals are listed here above. And we set those goals around 4 big areas: academics, our +1 pathways, facilities and our facility master plan, as well as social, emotional, mental health. And what you'll see tonight is a second iteration of these goals that look very much like the first set, but with some very specific targets and outcomes that we'd like to present for your consideration tonight. What we're suggesting for the 21-24 district goals are, number 1, to continue to improve academic achievement. This goal has not changed from the original 2019-2021 goals. Second, guarantee that each graduate is future ready. This goal is similar, but we've changed some of the language to focus on each and every student to make sure that we are providing equitable opportunities for all students. And you'll see that language reflected in other goals and targets as well. Third, we hope to improve and maintain our learning facilities. And last, Mr. Hamilton will share some information about how we plan to ensure that each student is supported and connected to school. So under the goal of academic achievement, you'll see that our targets are similar to where they were in 2019 to 2021. But we've stretched out to 2024. We are still focused on ensuring that 80% of our students meet the average, high average, or high scores on MAP in reading and in mathematics. We are also continuing to work on growth, and you'll notice that by 2024, our goal is to hit 60% of our students meeting their individualized growth targets. This is a stretch goal that we set in 2020. After we achieved our first target of 50% achieving their individual growth targets. And the last target, target 1.3, we are still continuing our work to make sure that every student demonstrates growth every year. We've refined goal 2 a little bit, as I mentioned earlier, to focus on each graduate, making sure that they're future ready. But we also revised this goal to put a greater emphasis on our Diploma +1 programs. And so what you'll notice is a stair-stepped goal from 2022 all the way to 2023 and 2024, increasing each year the percentage of seniors who are graduating with a high school diploma and a second credential. So for the graduating class of 2022, our target is 60% of those students earning a second credential, all the way up to the class of 2024, 2 years away, where we hope to have 100% of our students graduating with the second credential. Our third goal, Mr. Wilson will provide an update on our learning facilities.
Thank you, Dr. Vorthman. So we believe that students not only require rigorous academic materials, but also a learning environment that is conducive for academic achievement. So to that end, we're looking at Goal 3. Goal 3 focuses on enhancing the learning environment from a structural to a technological standpoint. A number of the goals presented were identified in the Master Facility Plan, and the use of ESSER funding will enable the district to move up the timeline for these projects before they were a 1 to 5 year project timeline. We hope to move those up to maybe 2 to 3 years, assuming we can find contractors who are available for this work, which is becoming more difficult as the day goes by. Target 3.1, the Master Facility Plan identified certain buildings for HVAC improvements, and those buildings were Edison, Bloomer, Roosevelt, and Longfellow. The projects will enhance air quality in these buildings and provide a more comfortable learning space. Target 3.2 is technology, which is critical for enhanced learning in today's world. This is why the district is investing in up-to-date technology, including flat panels, Chromebooks, and servers for virtual learning, all of which will assist in addressing learning loss during the 2021 school year that we experienced. Target 3.3, we need to think differently on how furniture is used in the classrooms. Old desks and furniture do not adequately accommodate technology and innovative learning. New furniture in outdoor classrooms at certain buildings will provide flexible learning spaces and allow out-of-the-box presentation of instructional materials. The ESSER funds that we will use to finance this endeavor will update and enhance our learning environments. Target 3.4, the master facility plan identified certain enhancements and renovations over the next 5 years. As I've somewhat stated in the past, we've already addressed a number of these urgent needs, and the maintaining an annual focus on the plan will ensure preservation and modernization of our district buildings. Lastly, Target 3.5, the district is currently developing plans for construction of an early learning center, which will provide preschool students an educational opportunity, thus increasing the chance of future academic success. The current plan is to complete construction in the summer of 2023 and open for the 23-24 school year. And with that, goal 4, I want to introduce Mr. Hamilton.
I wondered
We
what
have
that
some new
was.
technology in the room, so
Did you notice the new cameras too for
Yeah.
our boardroom? Yeah. And the mics.
so goal 4 is different than it has been in the past, but it really is ensuring the same thing. We want to ensure each student is supported and connected. You may have heard that our goal district-wide is to make sure that each student graduates with a diploma plus a second credential. The metrics, the 6 different metrics that we have for this goal really focuses on that. Target 4.1, 4.3, and 4.4 will all be measured using the panorama survey that we've presented in the past. So 4.1 looks at 80% of our students will report a positive self-perception of social and emotional competencies. This is really, how do students feel like they fit in with others? How do they deal with stress, their grit? How do they feel they're doing socially and emotionally? Target 4.2, 80% of the students will have an average daily attendance of 95%. In the past, we've talked about chronic absenteeism. That's 90%. 95% is really what we've looked at when we've looked at the diploma plus 1. The students who have 95% attendance or higher, they are the ones who are on target to reach that diploma plus 1. So that's the measurement that we're going to use moving forward. Target 4.3, 85% of students will report that they like school. We've used this in the past. We've raised it from where we were. We were at 80%, so in the next 3 years, we want to get that to 85%. Target 4.4 is a new one for us. We find this really important. 100% of students will report that they have at least one caring adult at their school. We've been talking about becoming a trauma-informed district. We've been working on it for 2 years now. This doesn't just have to be teachers. This can be nutrition staff, bus drivers, coaches. It doesn't matter who it is in the building, but each student should have somebody in the building that they can point to say that this person cares about me. So we're going to ask students twice a year if they have somebody in the building that they can point to that really cares about them, that really knows them, that's built that relationship with them. Target 4.5 is reduce office referrals by 10%. This has been an ongoing trend. They've been going down the last 2 years. You might know that we've had some reduced school time the last 2 years, so we would expect that. So we want to reduce it by 10% moving forward. And target 4.6 is 75% of secondary students will participate in extra and co-curricular activities. I gave you a report in Friday Notes about our extra and co-curricular activities. Next month, the athletic directors will be here to present more information on that. We want to have 75% participation in our secondary schools. With that, I will answer any questions, or my colleagues would be happy to answer any questions.
Questions from the board? I have one question on the students reporting that they have at least one caring adult in the building. I think that's a very important thing to be tracking. I'm curious to know, are there proactive ways in which teachers, building principals, staff are working together to identify which students maybe might not have that relationship with the staff member?
Yeah, I think Mr. Cano really brought this to our attention coming new to us, and I think there's ways that when we look at kids looking at the data whether we look at kids who have been referred for office referrals or maybe not, their grades aren't where we are, really looking at those kids individually and identifying who is this kid's caring adult in the building. We haven't asked this before, so this will be new data for us moving forward. But I think we ask that now when we look in our student success teams, but it's really more staff-centered than it is student-centered. So we're going to ask the students if they have someone.
I have a question on I think Dr. Merrill had given us some preview of this and talked a little about the panorama survey, driving several of those initiatives, or at least our kind of improvement on them. What are we going to do to try to, I feel like, ensure we're getting good feedback from students and a quality survey? You know, I know at times I think we've got good info, and other times we think we have horrible info, so, or from our,
Yeah, one of the things, we've been doing the panorama survey for a while, and I don't think, quite honestly, that I have done as well as I could have to engage the parents and families with it and the staff, and I think making it more, making it more,
Priority.
making it a bigger priority is really going to help. And they have really good information. Panorama has been a really good partner with us. They have more parent information, better parent information. I think we need to do better in engaging that. Having the SEL curriculum that the board approved last month that we're going to be doing K-12 with our students is really going to make a difference too, because it's tying in. And so now we're bringing all of the pieces in together to really have a more unified approach with it.
Any other questions? Thank you.
And now we'll move on. We'll move on to our second presentation, and that will be on our ESSER ARP plan, beginning the 21-22 school year.
All right, well, let's take a little minute to talk about our ESSER and ARP plan. This is another acronym that we've been provided by the federal government to help describe the groups of funds that schools were awarded as part of the COVID relief packages that have been passed. When we look at the entire body of COVID relief measures, this really has come to us in three big buckets. The first bucket was ESSER 1. That was passed right after the pandemic started in March of 2020. That awarded to us about $1.8 million with the goal that all of those funds needed to be expended by September of 2022. Majority of that money went to enhance cleaning, sanitation, getting our schools ready to be reopened in the fall. And according to Mr. Wilson, that money has been spent. ESSER 2 was the second group of funding that came in December of 2020. This was right after the Christmas holiday. Our school district received $8 million, and a majority of that money has been spent on getting us technology, responding to the pandemic, and we'll talk about a few other things as that money has not completely been expended as of today, but it must be expended by 2023. And then the last and largest pot was passed in March of 2021, this year, and that is known as the American Rescue Plan, or ESSER 3, and that was $18 million. And those dollars have some additional requirements, one of which is that the school district provide a plan of how they're going to spend those dollars, and that a certain percentage of them be set aside for learning loss. All of those funds must be expended by 2024. So when we talk about our plan tonight, you're going to see some pretty large numbers. And I just want to assure you that not all of those dollars will be spent immediately. They will be spent over the course of the next 3 years. And some of them are for ongoing expenses to cover all 3 of those years of expense. So as we started looking at how we were going to spend these dollars, we wanted to get some feedback from a wide variety of stakeholders. So not only did Dr. Murillo engage our superintendent roundtable about how we should go about spending these one-time federal dollars, we also asked our parents, our community, and our staff what they thought we should do with these dollars. You can see by the graphic on the screen, we had about 548 staff members that participated in our thought exchange. They shared over 400 different comments and rated each other's comments nearly 12,000 times. Our parents also, we had almost 300 parents that responded with over 300 comments and nearly 7,000 ratings. So we got a really robust sample set of ideas from both staff and parents, and what we did is put those together and tried to find themes across both of them. And so after all of the feedback was taken, there were really 4 big things that came to the surface. The first was the continued investment in classroom materials, curriculum materials, classroom supplies, instructional supplies. Secondly, the focus on the social, emotional, behavioral, and mental health needs of our students. Third, continuing our work on either technology or facility upgrades and enhancements. And lastly, addressing class size. And so as a cabinet, we've taken the bulk of this summer to look at all of those individual comments, look at the themes, and we identified some priorities and aligned them to our goals so that we have dollars and resources aligning to what we want to achieve as outcomes. And so that's how you'll see this information presented tonight. So in the area of academic achievement, our first goal to improve academic achievement, we plan to spend about $1.4 million on strengthening universal instruction. And you've heard me talk about that many times for the past several years about the importance of having a strong universal tier, that first line of support for students. And so items under this line item will include continuing to invest in our Bridges mathematics curriculum. You've already approved some of the professional development opportunities that we have for teachers, both high school, middle school, elementary mathematics. We also are pleased to announce that Dr. Murillo has dedicated a $500 classroom grant for every teacher, licensed staff member in our school district. And they'll be receiving more information about that after the board meeting tonight. We've also designated about $3.5 million to support struggling learners. And this includes the addition of additional English language learner staff, more intervention materials for students who need additional support, either in reading or math, and the continued expansion of our summer learning programs for the next 3 years. Under Goal 2, we want to continue to provide upgrades and enhancements to our +1 pathways. And this includes items such as reinvesting in our middle school and high school engineering programs, launching a new computer science pathway in our high schools, and providing additional funding for our TradeWorks academies at both Abraham Lincoln and Thomas Jefferson high schools to continue to address the demand that they have from students. And then lastly, we want to continue to provide robust opportunities for students to participate in at-home learning. And $1.7 million has been allocated over the next 3 years to continue to allow us to develop and deploy our virtual academy, both at Crescent Elementary School and content developed by our middle school and high school teachers. So Mr. Wilson will provide an update on ESSER expenses for Goal 3.
Worthman. One thing that I want to clarify with the board, so you saw those three tranches of ESSER money coming in. We did receive at the very beginning a check for $1.8 million for that grant. However, the other two are on as incurred basis. So I file reports every quarter with the Department of Education, and then they reimburse us. They actually review those expenditures to make sure that it meets their guidelines. If you look at the legislation for each one of those, it specifically outlines a swath of what you can spend the money on, so we just can't spend it any way that we want. Not only does the DE look at that, but also our auditors, when they come out, will be looking at that as well. I had cataracts out, so now I have to wear reading glasses. Okay. Again, the master facility plan identified a number of recommended HVAC projects, which were originally scheduled over a 5-year period of time. So some of this would be a bit redundant from what I spoke with earlier, but it's a little bit more in depth. HVAC upgrades will provide better ventilation and enhance outdoor airflow into our buildings, reduce humidity levels in the classrooms, and we also have some boiler replacement at 1 or 2 buildings that have been long needed. And so with this money, we can actually, as I say, we can move up the timeline to get this work done. Number 2, on the instructional technology, this is for Google Chromebooks over the next 3 years. We've been paying this out of the SAVE fund over the past X many years, so now we can use this money for that purpose. Smart display screens, you saw an example of that when John came over and just dragged that icon over. New service for virtual learning. Touchscreen Chromebooks for our kindergartners. And we are looking at investing some money into the Blink upgrade. Blink was started about 10 years ago for the public Wi-Fi, and some of the technology is a bit antiquated today, and they're looking at doing some upgrades, so we set aside some money for that as well. Cleaning and sanitation. So while $350,000 over the next 3 years seems like a lot of money, if you take that and divide it over 17 buildings, that's about $21,000 a building for three years per building. So it's not an unusually large amount of money. And for that, we're going to do the continued upgraded cleaning as we have done in our buildings this year. Additional gloves, masks, safety materials, whatever we have to do, we'll purchase out of those funds. And the Victory sprayers, those are the sprayers where they spray it on a surface, they let it dry for about 10 minutes, and then it kills all the germs in those areas. And those have been very, very helpful. In actually, if you look at our colds and flus for the last year, they're way, way down. So hopefully that had something to do with it as well. Classroom upgrades. So this is the cost of classroom furniture as previously discussed in our goal presentation. It also will include some construction to get some of that, classroom furniture in there and set up, but that's essentially what we would use the classroom upgrades for. So with that, I'll introduce Mr. Hamilton again to talk about Goal 4.
Okay. So goal 4, again, we are ensuring each student is supported and connected. Later in this meeting, you're going to be approving our partnerships that we have with several different agencies that provide therapy. Those agencies are great, but we also know that we have students who have needs more than that one time a week that therapists can come to a building and see them. So with this money that we're allotted, we want to be able to hire 10 therapists that work within our schools that would be in each of our school buildings every single day to see those kids that are in crisis every single day. They may not check in with that student every day, but they're there. When families come in and the kid's in crisis, they're immediately able to see a therapist and work with a therapist that's there. So that number is a large number, but again, that's 10 therapists over a 3-year period. The student and family advocates, those essentially, we have student family advocates at several of our elementary buildings already. We want to have a student and family advocate in every one of our elementary buildings. Student and family advocates are essentially they're social workers, and we already have them in our secondary buildings. The difference between a student family advocate and a therapist is the student and family advocates are really meeting the needs of kids and removing barriers for them coming to school. So they're working with community partners whether it's food, clothing, whatever it is that students or families may need, that's keeping a kid coming from school. And when we talk about reducing chronic absenteeism and getting kids to school, that's really the goal of the student and family advocates. So that's increasing 2 student family advocates for 3 years. The universal SEL curriculum and the trauma-informed online academy, you have approved the curriculum last board meeting. We talked a little bit about that in the trauma-informed online academy. We're keeping training up with that in professional development with our teachers. So that's for a couple of years there. And then the last piece is the universal behavior supports. We want to ensure that all students have immediate intervention for behaviors, that we have plans at all schools that they're following, just like we do with reading and math, that all schools are following the same procedures. We're working with our MTSS program on this. So this is something we were doing anyway, so that includes this. And then materials for our peace corners, our sensory rooms, and de-escalation areas for students. And with that, I or my colleagues would accept any questions.
Any questions from the board? Thank you.
If I might close with this, a couple of statements.
sure.
Okay. I want to thank the work that the Cabinet's done on this. And Cabinet, I did kind of go through the details of this in our session before. So the board has really talked about this an hour before we got in here. So they had lots of questions, but maybe I was able to head those off before you got up. So I appreciate the work you've done. Good compliments from the board about how this was so transparent and laid out and aligned to our goals. And so that just reflects the work that you've done. So thank you very much.
I might add what I had brought up there during the meeting. I just think that there'll be people who will be in the community saying, wow, it's a lot of money. You know, what are they doing with all my government dollars? And, you know, is it smart to be even spending all these dollars? And I think there's folks who have inflation fears and all these other fears right now, right? But I think for, you know, to see a plan like this where those dollars are actually being invested right into the classroom, right into our curriculum, into our education, you know, and hopefully into the betterment and improvement of our children's lives, you know, I think is a kind of a blessing to see. And, you know, we're not using this as bonuses for folks. We're not throwing it into our pension. You know, I think we're using exactly what it was planned for. So just kudos to everybody involved in the process.
I guess I do have one question, Dr. Murillo. I think Dr. Worthman said with ESSER 3, districts are required to submit a plan for how they plan to use those dollars. And is there a date by which we are required to do that?
Yes, August 20th. I think that's why we had so much of the work done. Dr. Vorthman really took the lead to position us to get that going. It's just the return to learn plan. We did not have to create a return to operations plan to submit. So the academic piece, Dr. Vorthman really took that and got that, and it's almost completed.
And is that return to learn plan available now? That's completed and,
It is almost completed. It will be uploaded. We will have dates on our prior return to learn plan, and then it will show any changes or amendments that were made to it.
okay.
It'll be posted on our website
When do you think that will be?
by August 20th.
Okay. Putting you on the spot here. Okay. And I think I did want to make a comment regarding the return to learn plan. I think that I can speak for all the board members when I say that we are all concerned about the safety of our children and staff, and very aware of what's happening with the new variants. And we are all prepared to, you know, make those difficult decisions, but not prepared to break the law. So, or defy a lawful mandate from the governor. That's just something that we are not prepared to do. So that return to learn plan will kind of spell out the ways in which we are working to keep our School Community Safe. And that'll be available August 20th.
And we only have to look to Des Moines Public School District to see what happens when a school district decides to defy the governor, and what happens to their administrative team when they do defy that lawful order. So we don't need that happening here. I'd like to keep Dr. Murillo around a little bit longer, and the rest of our administrative team, because it's, even though it was approved by the school board, the superintendent received the full brunt of the repercussions. So I'm not prepared to put our superintendent in jeopardy of losing her credentials.
I might add, I think the hardest thing for us, though, is probably just watching the backslide in performance for our students, backslide in mental health for our students, and obviously keeping them in school, is our main concern. I think, making sure we're helping these kids improve through this next calendar year, and this isn't another lost year. So as much as I think safety, health and safety is important, I think mental health, I think the educational environment we provide students in the building is so much better than we could provide online, or mixed up or hybrid or whatever else we've done, and this is, I think many of us have kids, who are in the district currently. Many of us had kids who've been in the district, so I think it's something we all feel, that pull either way, because we're all involved.
Okay, thank you. This brings us to the resolutions portion of our agenda. We have several this evening. First is a resolution appointing and approving paying agent, bond registrar, and transfer agent. Is there a motion?
Move to approve UMB Bank, N.A. of West Des Moines, Iowa, to serve as paying agent, bond registrar, and transfer agent, and authorizing the execution of the same.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? These related to some of the actions that we took last month. Okay. Mr. Wilson, please call the roll.
Dr. Ogres,
Yes.
Mr. Kazire,
Yes.
Mr. Arthur,
Yes.
Ms. Shudek,
Yes.
Mr. Minshaw,
Yes.
Mr. McGlade,
Yes.
and Mr. LaFurla.
Yes, the motion carries. Now we have a resolution authorizing and providing for the terms and issuance and securing payment on $9.4 million of revenue bonds. Is there a motion?
Yeah, I can move the authorize and provide for the terms and issuance and securing payment on $9,400,000 revenue bonds, Series 2021 of the Council Bluffs Community School District, State of Iowa, under the provisions of Chapters 423E and 423F of the Code of Iowa, and providing for a method of payment of said bonds.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Mr. Wilson, please call the roll.
Mr. Arthur,
Yes.
Ms. Shudek,
Yes.
Mr. Kazire,
Yes.
Mr. McGlade,
Yes.
Mr. Minshaw,
Yes.
Dr. Ogres,
Yes.
Mr. LaFurla.
Yes, and the motion carries. Now we have approval of tax exempt certificate. Is there a motion?
I can move that the form of tax exemption certificate be placed on file and approved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Mr. Wilson, please call the roll.
Mr. Arthur,
Yes.
Mr. McGlade,
Yes.
Mr. Minshaw,
Yes.
Dr. Ogres,
Yes.
Mr. Kazire,
Yes.
Ms. Shudek,
Yes.
and Mr. LaFurla.
Yes, and the motion carries. Now we have approval of new required policies. Is there a motion?
Move to approve the mandatory new policy 433, employee expression, replacement policy 633, student expression, and new administrative regulation 633.1, student expression and student publications code as presented, and to waive the second reading of 433 and 633.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on these new policies?
Maybe we could just share with the public what this is and why it is.
Right.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Mr. Milborn's been tracking this for me and working on this. And I'm going to have him come up and join me.
So what was the specific question? I'm sorry.
Give us an overview. Give us the why. Remember we were talking
About-
about why?
Yeah, so
Jeff said before.
these went into effect. ISAB said they're the mandatory to align with the law on, and we received these July 2nd. So that is to, the additional protections on employees and students related to free expression that the legislation passed recently.
Yeah, I really felt like, Gary, as we dug into this, it was really looking at defining speech rights. And it really was providing some real clarity that what is the right for students and what's the right of the employee. It talks about social media. It really talks about even the paper that we would produce at each of the high schools, and really having some clarity around that, protecting all sides of free speech, as long as it is not something that is very negative or impactful to someone because of their race, religion, creed, and really helping to provide, if we look at, what was the last social media incident that happened?
Dance.
Yes, the dancer cheerleader. And what she went home and did on social media using some profanity and discussing her displeasure with how things turned out. And the school was going to take action against that. And it was clear that that was something done outside of the school. And so she had free speech rights to do that. And it's really looking at and digging into what is the First Amendment protect? And what does that look like? And our state really took some stance on that and rewrote some and provided some additional clarity. And so that's really what I see this action being taken tonight. Plus, it is to be compliant with the new level that's required. Anything else, Gary?
That was perfect. It really is aimed at social media, and it really is about protecting opposing views, as long as, and the limitations are really defined, especially on the student side. But when it gets into disrupting district operations or instructional operations, that's where we can step in. But if it doesn't do that, then it's, all views are welcomed on social media, I guess.
And the one piece, if I was wondering as a superintendent, then Dave, I know you guys talked about it at ISBA, is a lot of times some things that happen outside of the school, the parents are really wanting schools or the administration at a school to do something. And this is going to be something really for us to navigate through what is areas we can be a part of and what are areas that we cannot. I'm sorry, Dave. I know you had a comment.
No, I'm just leaning in so that
Okay.
I can
Oh, yeah,
see you and
yeah.
follow the conversation, so.
And the other piece that I saw, as you can see, I've been trying to really understand this and grasp this, is the walk-ins and walk-outs. Because as you remember, a couple of years ago, we had walk-outs. And really, what did that look like, and what were the steps of the administration when we were there? As long as it was peaceful and the students went out and came back in, there were no actions taken. But they even speak to that in this piece of new language, both sides.
Of us taking a neutral point of view and allowing both sides, once again, as long as it's not disruptive.
And these policies are modeled after the IASB. Did they produce sample policies or?
Yes.
Okay.
They provided those to us July 2nd.
So my question would be then, how can we be neutral when we are dealing with fact versus fiction? When we have truths that that have the same value now, today, that untruths have, and misinformation and out lies, today I see where each view is weighed equally. They are not of equal value. We have the truth, which should prevail. So how can we navigate through this challenge of holding up a lie to the same value as the truth? So that's, to me, that's the challenge that we deal with. But they're asking us to have equal and fair and balanced viewpoints on both sides. But how can we do that when one is a lie? And people want to just follow that lie, whatever it is. They think it has the same value as the truth. And if we speak it loud enough or long enough, or the right person, in their opinion, who yells it loud enough, decides that, yes, they are of equal value. So that's my statement. There's not much of a question there. But this is the challenge that classrooms have.
Sure. My HR answer to that would be we would look at each case on a case-by-case basis, look at all the surrounding factors, and then determine, has it crossed a line of those limitations that are outlined on the student side or the disruption of our operations on the district side.
Again,
post
that
a
was
lie.
my
There are-
soapbox. I wasn't necessarily looking for an answer.
There are
but
libel, slander, I mean, those traditional,
Exactly.
You know, and it
I
did
mean, you
talk
have the
about-
right and the freedom to say whatever you like, but then there are consequences to your words and actions that you should be prepared to take on. So,
Thanks, Gary.
and then this is one where we are waiving second reading.
because we have to
Because we're
do it.
trying to get it in place before our student handbook, employee handbook,
We have to have it in by August because of the requirement of the law.
by August,
Yeah.
okay. That's not what it states.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion and a second. Mr. Wilson, please call the roll.
Dr. Ogres,
Yes.
Mr. Arthur,
Yes,
Ms. Hudak,
Yes.
Mr. Minshaw,
Yes.
Mr. McGlade,
Yes.
Mr. Kazire,
Yes.
Mr. LaFurla.
Yes, the motion carries. Before us now is approval of second reading of policies. Is there a motion?
yeah. I can move to approve the second reading of policy 525, student dress code, along with the corresponding administrative regulation 525.1, student dress code guidelines and interventions.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion?
Yeah, I reached out to Dr. Morello earlier this week about this one, looking for some guidance on, potentially adding some language around specific apparel that could be considered racism or promoting racism when it comes to like the Confederate flag, the Iron Cross, things of that nature. And so Dr. Morello gave me a little bit of information, but I would love to hear more from the stance about why we're not calling some of that specific stuff out.
Yeah, really the reason why is we thought when you start to get really specific with things, that if you don't list everything, you kind of open the door for things to come in. And so that's why we left it that broad term of apparel or clothing that is promotes racism or discrimination. So we left it broader, so we didn't have to list and be real specific.
And I can understand that. I think some people might not know that some of those symbols have those connotations. So I definitely can understand where it could go one way or another, but
Yeah, we did have, within the group, we did have the conversation and went back and forth, but decided to leave it on a broader spectrum.
Suppose that would also depend on if the student's intentionally trying to be disruptive and to offend people,
Correct.
versus someone who's wearing an old General Lee shirt, if they still have those with the,
Yeah,
Dukes
to
of Hazzard or
quote
something.
Gary Milborn, we take each thing on a case-by-case basis, because, if students don't really know or understand, you don't want to assume that there's something going on that isn't. So you have to have those conversations.
sure.
Any other questions or discussion? Mr. Wilson, please call the roll.
Mr. Arthur,
Yes.
Mr. Minshaw,
Yes.
Ms. Hudak,
yes.
Dr. Ogres,
Yes.
Mr. McGlade,
Yes.
Mr. Kazire,
Yes.
Mr. LaFurla.
Yes, the motion carries. Now we have approval of Nutanix Virtual Data Center for AL and TJ. Is there a motion?
I move that the board approve the purchase of the Nutanix Enterprise Data Center for AL and TJ to CDW-G in the amount of $126,687.08.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? And this is included in the ESSER
Yes.
funding, correct? Okay.
And this is, server replacements for what we have at both high schools.
And if you'd like, we can go into detail with John, but this will allow us to kind of consolidate, put it all in 2 locations, which will be easier for us to service and to monitor. It will replace our current infrastructure.
Mr. Wilson, please call the roll.
Mr. Arthur,
Yes.
Dr. Ogres,
Yes.
Mr. Minshaw,
Yes.
Mr. McGlade,
Yes.
Mr. Kazire,
Yes.
Ms. Hudak,
Yes.
Mr. LaFurla.
Yes, motion carries. Now we have approval of increased substitute teacher rates for the 2021-2022 school year. Is there a motion?
Move to approve the increased substitute rates for the 2021-2022 school year.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I will gladly second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion?
And this is just for the rates, not the renewal of the contract of the third-party company, correct? That's correct. Okay, great.
Yeah, and do we want to talk about this, just so people at home know?
So that they understand.
Yeah.
Mr. Milborn did some research for me. We really wanted to make sure that we were competitive, especially with COVID. It was really hard to get subs last year. And one thing that he thought might make us more competitive is to make that $10 increase. So, Mr. Milborn?
We are in a recruiting battle at the moment with many positions, and substitutes are one. And so this puts us in line with many of the school districts across the river in Nebraska, and then puts us quite high in southwest Iowa here in our surrounding Iowa districts. So we want to recruit the best for our kids, and we feel this is another tactic that will help us.
And so these rates are increasing from, no, I can't move my.
150 to 165 and long-term rate of 160 to 175.
Okay. Yep. Thank you. Mr. Wilson, please call the roll.
Dr. Ogres?
Yes.
Mr. Arthur?
Yes.
Ms. Hudak?
Yes.
Mr. Minshaw?
Yes.
Mr. McGlade?
Yes.
Mr. Kazire?
Yes.
Mr. LaFurla.
Yes, and the motion carries. Now we have approval of our consent agenda, which includes a final list of 2021 graduates from AL and TJ, MOUs with Underwood Community School District and with mental health agencies in the area, annual SAM services agreement, data sharing agreement with Prodigy Education, appointment of level 1 investigators and complaint officers, special education contracts, esports equipment purchase, digital document camera, personnel agenda, and purchasing card transactions and purchases. Is there a motion?
Yeah, I'll move we approve the consent agenda.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Mr. Wilson, please call the roll.
Mr. Arthur?
Yes.
Mr. Kazire?
Yes.
Ms. Hudak?
Yes.
Dr. Ogres?
Yes.
Mr. Minsall?
Yes.
Mr. McGlade?
Yes.
And Mr. LaFurla.
Yes, and the motion carries. And finally, we have a board member resignation to discuss. John is moving out of the school district, and as a result, there are a few things that we need to discuss as a board. But first, John, thank you for your service on the school board and for your commitment to our students and families and staff and the taxpayers of our community. I think you represented all of those groups very well, and it's important that the public knows that you did that. So I appreciate your service, and I guess I would open that up to everybody.
Thank you, Chris and Dr. Merlo, the board. It's been a pleasure. I tried to find something in the district. It just didn't happen, so But, you know, it's been an honor, and I just want to say that if there's, you know, whatever role I can fill, committees or volunteer opportunities, just reach out. I'll be happy to still support the district.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Sure.
So with this vacancy, we basically have two options as a board. We can publish a notice to the public with our intent to appoint someone to fill that vacancy until the next election in November. Or we can hold a special election, which is our option, but seems kind of silly with an election coming up in November. If we do make a public notice to appoint someone to fill that seat, we have to do that within 30 days of the notice. John's resignation is effective as of Friday, July 30th, so I think that's when the 30-day clock starts to run for us. So I guess I would open that up. I'm making an assumption that we are going to publish that notice of intent to appoint someone to that position, but I'd like to open that up and make sure that everyone's in agreement to that.
Sounds like a great thing.
Yeah.
I don't think that we need a resolution to do that.
What if I don't want to accept his resignation?
There you go.
I would like a vote.
Oh, yes.
Whether we accept it or not, I think it's going to happen.
I know.
He moves.
So I guess at this point, we can go ahead and give Dr. Merlot the initiative to go ahead and post the public notice that we intend to appoint someone to that position within that 30-day time period. And so, you know, we need to talk a little bit about what our process is going to be for identifying potential appointees and how we're going to fill that seat. There are no, there's nothing in the state law that indicates what that process should look like. IASB does provide some guidance in terms of making sure that that process is transparent and equitable, and I'm confident that this board will follow those two guidelines. And they do recommend, with the public notice, submitting some sort of questionnaire for the public. Anybody who wishes to be considered to be appointed to that seat can fill out that questionnaire, submit that to the board secretary, and then at some point, we can all take a look at that.
So can I ask next steps?
Yes.
So I'm clear on next steps. I'll have Dean work with Amy, and we'll get it posted tomorrow. And then a questionnaire, we will post at least by next Monday afternoon,
Okay.
a week from this, next Monday. And then we also, I would like to see us post what process you guys decide to take, so that it's transparent of how we'll select. So, and then we can make sure that you have everything posted and everything's moving.
Sure.
Okay.
So
We-
that would probably mean we'd have to have a meeting in August before our next board meeting,
At least a special one.
a special meeting, to review the applicants.
Okay.
Yeah, so I do think that will be necessary. That technically our August board meeting falls within that 30-day time period, so, you know, we could use that meeting.
Doesn't give the applicant, the one that we choose.
Right,
Probably
right.
enough time to.
Just say, no, no, I would want to.
4 days you've been
Right.
selected. You know what I mean?
So I think maybe within this week, we can share a draft of a questionnaire for feedback from all of the board members and begin looking at potential dates for a special meeting that would work for all of us. Does that sound good?
Great.
Once again, thank you, John, for all of your service, and
Best wishes. It's a pleasure.
So before Mr. LaFurla closes, as we say goodbye to John, I also wanted to introduce two new cabinet members tonight. We have Ruben Canone, who will be taking over our secondary schools, and Dr. Tracy Matthews, who will be taking over our pre-K through elementary. So welcome aboard to the cabinet and welcome to the board meetings. We are so excited to have you part of our team. And thank you, Mr. LaFerla, for allowing me to do that.
Sure, and welcome. With that, we've concluded our business and we are adjourned.